Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the final session. Welcome back. Congratulations for those who have survived this far. Today we're going to be discussing, or this session is going to be discussing the advent of batteries and the whole process of decarbonization. And we're very fortunate to have one of the leading people who have been involved in the decarbonization program for several years. And as we know that OSV owners are required to seek investments and methods of cutting emissions and fuel consumption from operations. And in this session, we're going to discuss the whole decarbonization effort in the region, review some of the fuel options for owners, and the operational costs and risks involved. And more importantly, I think it's the context of where your decision-making lies and what are the costs and consequences. To introduce this particular subject, we have three panelists. We'd like to invite each of them to come on stage. We'll have a seat, and then each of them will present. We'll start with Mr. Arnstein Eknes, who is the Segment Director of OSVs and Special Ships at DNV, which among others include ship types such as offshore service and subsea vessels. Arnstein is working to improve technology, innovation, and the systematic need for adaptation to cope with decarbonization, alternative fuels, digital technologies, and new ways of assuring safe performance. Arnstein, welcome. Thanks. Following Arnstein, we'll have Mr. Andrew Bull, who has 35 years of experience in the maintenance of offshore in marine, maritime, offshore oil and gas, as well as in shipbuilding industries. He has extensive knowledge of materials and services in the Middle East, Indian subcontinent, and Southeast Asia. He is now the Vice President of Clean Shift Energy. Welcome, Andrew Bull.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you.
And finally, we have, last but not least, a presentation on cold ironing from Mr. Abdul Bari Al-Zubadi. He is the Senior Vice President, Ship Management at ADNOC Logistics and Services. He has more than 16 years of experience at sea and a unique background in both the operational and commercial fields. He is responsible for the day-to-day management of ADNOC L&S's shipping and offshore fleets. Mr. Abdul Bari, please.
Nice to see you. Hi, Andrew.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay, to start off with, we have Mr. Arnstein Eknes, who will be giving the first presentation on the path to decarbonization. Please, Arnstein.
Thank you.
Good idea, yes.
Thanks a lot for inviting me here today. Decarbonization is a big subject, so let's jump into it. The reason for doing this is, of course, what's happening with the planet and the focus on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the awareness of climate change. And one picture which I'm very fond of is this one. This was taken more or less at the time just after I was born, actually. I was a small kid when this was taken, but it helped us to create a new perspective on the globe, see ourselves from the outside. And if you wonder, from where was this picture taken? From a safe spaceship out there, fueled by hydrogen. So, ladies and gentlemen, hydrogen is not new. It has been around for a lot of time, and this provided energy, it provided electricity, it provided heat and clean water for the crew, for the astronauts, with zero harmful emissions. In DNV, our purpose is to safeguard life, property, and environment. That is a purpose we've had for quite a few years, 1864. And our vision is actually to be a trusted voice to tackle global transformations. And as such, we are working cross industries. We are actually trying to support both solar, renewable, wind industry, power grid system, onshore, offshore, etc. So about 70% of our colleagues are working on what you can call energy-related issues. And I think that's an important aspect when we are diving into decarbonization opportunities for the offshore industry. one of the things we do when we are preparing for the future is to analyze what is the shift happening right now. And if you see this one, this is showing the change, predicted change in CapEx investment offshore. You can see the big gray part there, that is oil and gas investment, CapEx investment. And our prediction right now is that offshore wind will go to take over. And you can imagine that we are not talking about removing all the oil and gas, but we are talking about creating a new business on top of what is already there. And the reason for mentioning this is that the transformation is for real. A lot of this investment is to provide clean energy for countries to be connected to the power grid. But I will also claim today that a really important part of this is actually to provide enough energy to create fuels for us in the maritime industry. The rest of shipping, not offshore vessels, but the rest of shipping, IMO are setting out a pathway, an ambition to decarbonize within the century. And they, of course, debating this summer whether they will sharpen that and do it in a shorter time. And many companies are following up, including the energy majors. And as you understand, if you have a big vessel, if you have an oil tanker or a bulk carrier, the easiest thing you can do is actually to have speed reduction. There are certain things you can do without investing anything. And then comes the point when you have to do conversions or retrofit, and the most difficult part is actually to shift fuel to something else. And that, so far, is postponed by most players. But this is you can call the stairway of decarbonization for traditional shipping. So the big question and the challenge that I've received from the organizer here is, how will this look like for OSVs? Is there anything here we can copy or model? So I will end up with that, actually, a bit later today. What is quite clear for offshore, the reason why OSVs are not included in it is that this is not easy. A lot of the work we do is not transportation work. And IMO is focusing on regulating transportation work now. We do service work, maintenance work. We have an emergency role. We have different functions to install and so on, which is beyond just transportation and pure transportation. It's a safe place for people. And there are many other roles and many functions, and they cannot be regulated just by going slower. How do you slow steam when you're in DP mode? There are different mechanisms behind here, so that is what I'm trying to illustrate today. And another challenge, this map is showing the expected change in fuel for the whole of the maritime industry. The challenge is that when we are moving from the red, which is oil-based, traditionally fossil, over to LNG, over to biofuels, over to electronic fuels and maybe battery. When we are moving that way, all of this requires more space on board to contain the same amount of energy. More space, larger volume, or heavier. So will we end up by just building bigger and bigger and bigger, requiring even more energy to transport it? We don't want to go in that direction either. So this is a real headache. What do we do? You can't just replace a new fuel into the existing tanks and systems. And that is the key motivation why point number one, or A, on this roadmap for OSVs, it should be to have focus on consuming less and knowing your operational profile. And to illustrate why this is important, I've stolen a picture from a different segment, not the OSV, but from a container segment. What this is showing is the speed profile and the loading profile and how much time it has spent in different mode over a period of 2 years, 24 months. And then you can see that, it's literally operating in different modes with different type of cargo. And then you ask the question, what was the design point for the shipyard and the owner in the contract? Well, they said, please make it optimum, the most energy efficient at this condition, which it never had during the next 2 years of operation. And my question to you is, how does this look like for an OSV? Because if we don't capture the real practical design envelope, if we don't capture that when we are designing, then we are asking the wrong questions and the wrong instructions to the shipyards and to designers. And we all know that OSVs, they are operating differently. They have different functions on board. They have different technology. Sometimes they are in DP, they can be in standby, they are on site or they're in transit. Sometimes the charterers say, please hurry up, come fast, and you will do. And sometimes the charterers say that you can actually use your time meaning the operational pattern varies a lot. So we have to be more clever as an industry to tell the vendors, the engine makers, the designers, and the shipyards that these are my different profiles. Please help me to be optimum in each. Build in design and flexibility when you're helping us. We need that to happen. And for that to happen, this is one example. What can the ship owner control? Not investing anything, but simply using less energy. Well, you can maybe slow steam if you agree with the charterer. There are certain things you can do. You can improve the engine load, the tuning on certain type of equipment. You can have crew awareness on certain performances, and it will give a benefit. So about 5%, this is a study we did for about 180 vessels operating globally, but with leading companies. And I predict that these numbers are maybe conservative here in the Middle East. We have example of companies here, ADNOC is one of them, which have been doing more than this. Then you can say, what is ship owner control, but it has some cost. For instance, polishing the propeller, to do that every maybe third or fourth month, depend to take away whatever is growing there. We know it's a short payback time, but if you don't stop the vessel for a few hours and do it, you will not take out the benefit. And then you have something which is really controlled by the charterer. And the total amount here was 15%. For those 180 vessels, we are talking about around 80 to 100 million US dollar in annual savings if you just do these 15% for 180 vessels. If we scale this up to worldwide, we are talking more than $1 billion US dollar of money which is just there. It's just start the processes to capture that value. So the first step on this roadmap is not to invest. The first step is actually to have focus. Focus on reducing the use of energy, focus to operate smarter, and start engaging with the charterer, talking in the value chain. And that means that if you can provide transparent information, collect the information, and show the data up the value chain, you are able to actually build more trust, and you will be allowed to do more. That is the hypothesis behind this. IMO are not helping us to say what we should report and what we should measure. That is why we are working with several now to target this and try to find out what to measure. It is not enough to say that I'm in port or I'm sailing, because of the role of the OSV varies a lot, from anchor handling to tug support to standby. Maybe there are so many different modes that we need to be more refined. But this is something that we want to work together with the industry to fix. And we have dialogues with several in this audience here. Second part on this roadmap. There are 3 parts on the roadmap. This is the second part. Improve the system efficiency. The next speaker will talk about hybridization and batteries, so I'm not going in depth on that, but you should really already today explore what can you do. So if you know your operational profile, how could hybridization help you to reduce even more? Beyond 15%, for additional 15 to 20, 25%. If you spend a lot of time in DP mode, we have several examples that some companies in DP mode are saving more than 50%. Instead of running on 4 gensets, they can run on 1 genset and batteries. That was explained yesterday. We have multiple cases like that, which is the core reason why some companies really see that, yes, it's helping to save fuel, it's helping to reduce emissions, and it's helping to reduce the operational cost. Because the alternative is that you are running with diesel gensets, and in the Middle East, if you have 4 of them running on your ships, and in EP2, and the weather is nice, you actually don't need the power from more than 1. So you're running on low efficiency, you have inefficient system performance. That is not good. And most of the time, OSVs and tugs in this area, they are running on low load performance. That we have data for. So on the picture to left behind me, on the left you can see for an OSV, and more than 75% is in the load scenario, meaning that's where the batteries would love to be in as a spinning reserve, for instance. So considering batteries is something that will help you immediately to take out benefits, and it's also a part of the component that you will need in the future if you really want to go with advanced technology, like the fuel cell, because the fuel cell don't like to go up and down in speed quickly. It likes to provide stable conditions for running. The batteries love transient loading, up and down. Combined, yes, then you have a flexible power system. I was challenged by Fasselboy to say something about cost. So this is one attempt to do that, and that's always dangerous because this is we are not in control of that cost. That's between vendors and different players. But you can see here on the bottom the total cost of one. This is not this specific battery installation, but this is an example. I think the ship as such is today owned by Seatrade. But the example here that is not linked to the ship, and you see $1.5 million US. That's the total cost for this retrofit, or for a specific retrofit that was planned. And then you see that the battery share of that is less than $500,000. So just remember, guys, that it's not just checking the price on batteries and the cost of batteries. There has to be some components additional, frequency drive, electrical modification. It should plug and play with the rest of the ship. It should work on board. It should be safe. You have battery management system, things like that. And the associated cost is important. In this case, more than, close to 70%. If you increase the battery size, the rest of the cost is not going the same way. So some of these are variables, and some of them are quite static until you reach certain limits. This number here, 586 ships already today with battery installations globally. That was valid in February, and I updated it this morning, so now the number is 619 in operation. 212 new builds, and I don't have a good track record of those that have planned conversion, so that will come in addition. But the moment it's sailing, the moment it's converted, it will be in this database, which is publicly available through our web page. We are hosting a web page for that. And you can see here that most of the offshore vessels, which are marked with a star, they have relatively small battery sizes from 600, 600 maybe up to 1.5 megawatt. The next speaker will probably go more in detail on what this is, but I just want you to show that this is not new technology as such. This is proven technology. Quite many are doing it today. And quite many of them are offshore vessels. The only segment that have more than offshore vessels are ferries, because they know exactly from where they're operating, from A to B, and they can plan for it. Another maybe known fact, or for me, I think this is really fun. You know, if you put in chemical energy, if you put in diesel, and then you burn it in an engine, you are also having energy losses. It's not so efficient. If you can go directly from the chemistry in the fuel, directly to electrical energy, which is what you do in a fuel cell, then you also remove a lot of the problems in between, which is why this with fuel cell is fascinating. And the rules for fuel cells for LNG has been around now for 20 years. The first OSV that had this one was a project called Viking Lady up north. But that technology is known. What is not public is more where are we today and what kind of fuel shall we plug into this. So that is what I will come to next. But before I do that, if you look on the left-hand side here, you will see that imagine you buy one, you put it into the system, and you get 22% out on the propeller, because there are inefficiencies in the system. And in a load scenario, which is the case a lot in the Middle East, you get 5% out. So you buy one, you get 5% out. If you could do this with fuel cell, if you have more optimum system setup, then you see the percentages going from 22% to 47%, which is a doubling. And you see in a low scenario, it's from 5% to 42%. This is a specific calculation example we have done on energy potential for a PSV. And a PSV is sometime in standby, sometime in DP, and for this particular PSV, about 60% was in transit. So again, how these numbers will look for you guys depends on where you are operating, what type of vessel, exactly for how long are you sailing, and how efficient is that logistics. And that is something which you can also negotiate with the charterer to have more efficient use of the vessel. But what this is illustrating is that the selection of the component will decide how much of the energy you have on board is actually being used. So A, use less energy, B, use the energy smarter. That's what I'm saying. Can electrical? Yes, it can be an option. This is just an example of a shore power, which is soon to be regulated in Europe. There are multiple shore power connections for big container carriers from San Diego in the west to, that is something that all ports in all areas, including in this area, is talking about, and we will hear more about that also later today. But shore power, the next step would be offshore power. What about charging on site? What about charging from the rig or charging from a charging buoy? That technology will come. And then it's a matter of re-looking who is paying for what and is giving the total best economics and the total best impact on efficiencies and emissions. Because the last step, that is actually to change to cleaner fuels. Step number 1, use less. Step number 2, use the energy smarter. And step number 3, which clean fuel to use. Quite many are asking us every day, which fuel should I use? And what shall we answer on that? It all depends. We don't see one fuel today standing out as a silver bullet. There are quite many new builds in the offshore segment today which are preparing for methanol. There are quite many pilot projects looking into ammonia. There are some that are looking into hydrogen. There are different concepts. But what we can say is that bio or e-fuels or traditional fossil fuels combined with CCS are definitely where we think the reality will be in the end. So one of these 3 lines will need to provide fuel, and then we have to remember that the biggest fuel consumers in this world are not the OSVs. It's the big container liners, it's the cruise carriers, it's the big VLCCs. There are so many other ship types that are consuming, I would say 35% of the ships in the world, they are consuming 80% of the fuel. That's the number we have. So we need to collaborate with these, and we need to have the fuel transition where this fuel is being used. This illustration is also showing that the total use of energy is the most optimum if you can have clean electricity from solar directly into the battery. And it shows that the e-fuels require a lot of energy, a lot of electricity to be made. I think we have a bird enjoying the subject here. I like that. This is nature coming to life.
Great presentation.
But what I want you to remember is that the new fuel does not necessarily come easily. It has to require more energy to produce it. And the second part, before you order the new ship and say that I want to go on methanol from day number 1, maybe the technology is not ready yet. And right now, there are more technology available for 2-stroke engines than for 4-stroke, and for fuel cells. But the technology will come, including CCS. We are launching more about CCS around Nor-Shipping a few weeks from now. And we have fuel-ready class notations. So, I mean, what many of the new builds, or those that are considering new builds today, is actually what to prepare for the future and how to make sure that they are ready for that. So if I'm adding this into the first map, consume less, that you can do today, and you may save money by doing it. It's not a cost, it's a cultural change. It creates insight, it's helping you to prepare for the future new builds. B, retrofit and modifications, consider what to do to use the energy smarter. There is a lot you can do, and that is being done by the industry today, including shore power. And the third element is this with cleaner fuels. You can start this dialogue with the charterers if you're an OSV owner, but you can't make the decision alone, because this is really an industry challenge. This is not something for each one of us to solve alone. And I think with that summary, I'm giving the word back to Fatsal. Thanks a lot for listening in.
Wow, thank you. Not many of you can see, but there is a timer on the presentation, and he pulled the curtain across when it hit 00.
Absolutely.
I'm very impressed with time. Time management, I guess, is very important. Takeaway from this particular presentation, I think, is when people go into an ERP program, they think they can call a service provider like IBM or anyone, Oracle or whatever, and put it in. But they don't realize the hard work comes from the management team defining the process, defining the systems, well before automation or ERP or digitalization can solve your problems. You've got to know what you want. I think that comes through with this roadmap, that you have to know what you want. The technologies will come, some are here, but you have to have a commitment in dialogue, in collaboration, before you get there. Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Andrew Bull from Clean Shift.
Thank you.
He's going to talk to us about batteries on board OSVs.
I hope so. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to take you through our philosophy on batteries. Hello. Good. If I may indulge me, just a short introduction to my company, Shift Clean Energy. We're a Canadian-based company. We specialize in energy storage solutions, batteries. We put batteries on ships and on land equipment as well. So we have a global network, we have proprietary leading technology, and we have some unique things about our products as well, which I won't go into all of those details today, but just to give you a short overview. As I say, we're active in 17 different markets with our own companies and operating through our channel partners, including the UAE and Saudi. So when I was given the brief for this presentation, I thought, well, let's start with the industry considerations. And in fact, what my learned colleague covered an awful lot of what I'm going to say today. So it's like we segued perfectly together. So that was also good. So in terms of industry considerations, there's a lot of change taking place. I mean, we heard it yesterday. I heard it again this morning that a lot of shipping companies at the moment, charterers, they don't quite really know what's going to happen with new fuels, which way they're going to go, what's the right solution. I think there's a lot of wait and see. It's sometimes easier to do nothing. I think there's a little bit of that approach sometimes we see. But the second point here is that I think the message we want to put across is whichever fuel ultimately you adopt, whether it's today's fuels or future fuels, the battery will always be able to optimize your fuel efficiency on board. And we've already proved ourselves as battery suppliers with different applications for house loads, with hybrid solutions, all electric propulsion, depending on the application. And agreeing again with my colleague that the data that we receive from our clients in terms of the profile and the operating profile of their vessels, that's really key to us giving them the optimum solution for the energy storage that they require. And then the last point to make on industry considerations is the modular design that all battery suppliers have. This is not unique to Shift, to my company, but the design that we can have today on board a ship, whether it's in a 20-foot container or whether it's a modular system, it's adaptable. As you retrofit that vessel to the next fuel and dual fuel systems, the batteries can also change accordingly. So whatever battery solution you have today, it can be adapted for the life of your vessel. So I think there's still a reticence for people to adopt energy storage because they're not quite sure what their vessel might look like in 3, 4, 5 years' time. But the battery companies today have the capability to give you a flexible system that will allow you to future-proof your vessel. And I think that's important for people to recognize. So what do we look at when we consider hybrid OSVs? And we've kind of taken a step here that we believe the OSV profile fits a hybrid solution rather than an all-electric solution. There's certain applications you would use all-electric, but I think for us as Shift, we see hybrids as being the way forward with an OSV operation, certainly the vessels we know within this region. So an OSV is typically looking at dynamic positioning, long periods of loitering or idle time. Instant unlimited power is required, which is one of the main upsides of a battery energy storage system. Fast power immediately. Response time is 7 milliseconds. That's quicker than you can blink. So the energy storage that we can provide to give that unlimited power is there. A fast system recovery in terms of how the cycles we have within our battery and charge and discharge. And safety, and frankly, I could have put safety at the top of that list because obviously safety is at the core of all of your thinking. So again, just leading on from the previous slide, what we're looking for when we're designing our batteries with OSVs in mind and the profiles of many of our clients in this region, peak shaving is a big concentrated effort for us in terms of the short duration. You need high power requirements. Load leveling, and also spinning reserve. These are all things that we're working on with, dare I say, that the likes of ADNOC in conversations with the operation of some of their vessels and retrofit opportunities. These are the kind of typical profiles that we're looking to meet. So why energy storage? I've touched upon some of this already, but you have improved energy efficiency, you have elimination and reduction of CO2 emissions, SOx. I think, again, I could have put this higher, a better work environment. I think there's a lot been talk about welfare of our crew and noise and fumes and actually just making it a nicer environment to be on board a vessel. I could also add into that, obviously there's less maintenance with a battery. Batteries basically don't go wrong. The life cycle of our batteries is 10 years plus, so you don't have to adapt the system in that time, unless the vessel needs to adapt for fuels or as I said earlier. So the welfare of the crew is a key consideration. You can make it much more pleasurable, if I can use that word, to be on board the vessel working if you've got these kind of benefits, and batteries bring you that benefit. And improve P&L. That might surprise, I might get some raised eyebrows on that, but I'll come back to some numbers later. But there is a payback on this stuff as well. So a little bit about our energy storage, but I want to also be generic here. I'm talking on behalf of battery companies globally here. It's not just about Shift Clean Energy. These are benefits that are there for other companies as well. Energy, peak power required. So we have some applications, for example, like ferries in Scandinavia. You know the routes they're taking. It's A to B. They're looking at energy storage. It's very easy to charge. We have a swap out system, in fact, called Power Swap, where we swap the batteries out, and when the ro-ro is in station on port, we swap out a fully charged battery and we take the other battery away and then charge that up. OSVs, you need power. It's all about power when you need it to stay on station. If the weather changes, you need to suddenly kick in the battery. It kicks in immediately. So it's high power energy storage. So time and power available for charging. This is where you would actually switch out one or two of the generators and use the generator to charge the battery on board. Operational profile, which again my learned colleague has referred to heavily, and I totally agree with that. We need key data. We need to understand the operational profile of vessels so that we can come up with the optimum solution. And the number of charge cycles is also important in a battery profile, and we have the best in class. I will say that is something I can say about my company. 15,000 cycles is the lifespan of our batteries because of the architecture and the makeup of our product. Advancements in technology, because the other conversations I have with a lot of clients and prospects in this region is, well, battery technology is improving all the time. So do I buy today, and will I have a better system in a year's time, 2 years' time? So when do I invest? We have something called cell swap, which we swap out the cells. So as the technology improves, we will just come along and swap out the cells, and that's part of our commitment to the customers. This will extend the life of the system. As I say, our system will last 10 to 15 years. The battery life of our system that we install, but we can extend that life by just switching the cells out, and that's something we provide within our offers. We're a world leader in sustainability and recycling. We have a cradle-to-grave mapping system so that we know where all of our products go, and we have a recycling company in America that we use, and the batteries, the chemistry of our batteries is 96% recyclable, which is a big statement, but it's proven technology, and we can recycle our batteries almost 100%. So there's no concern when we finish the life, when the cells are finished, they can be recycled. So that's also a big thing that we discuss with clients. This is a little bit about how cell swap works. I don't know if it comes across on the screen there fully, but it's very easy to just take the cell out. That's the case. You take the cell out, and it's swapped within seconds. Safety, I wanted to touch upon this particularly. All cells must be able to consistently operate at the optimum temperature. Many companies have air-cooled. We actually have liquid-cooled batteries, and that's our technology that we use. And we have a system in place where the cooling system that we use maintains the temperature of the cells at 23 degrees constantly, even in the temperatures that you operate here. In the engine room, obviously, it gets very, very warm, but the temperature of our system is 23 degrees, and it's maintained at that, plus minus one degree maybe. So we also have a system called On Watch, where we monitor the temperature and the performance of our cells as well. So that's something that I think we have to make clear, that batteries are very safe. They can be made very safe, and we monitor that safety, and the temperature that they can be maintained at should not give any alarms, even within the operating temperatures that we have within the Middle East. So again, I won't go through every bullet, but it reverses thermal runaway, which can be a problem where you can have leaks. So we avoid that as well. We have no incidents of any kind of thermal runaway. So it's a proven system and has been in place for many years. I think that's the other thing I would say. This is a proven technology, but I'm talking generally here. The battery technology is a proven technology. This is our cooling system in terms of how it's running through the system, and this is constantly going through our system throughout the whole cycle of the battery. So this is not something that you just press a button and it suddenly works. This is a constantly running liquid cooling system that goes throughout our battery. We also run a test. I didn't put the video up here. I didn't want to alarm anybody, but we do what they call a nail penetration test, where we actually put a nail into one of our cells, and there's actually no. I'm getting an interesting look there from one of my colleagues. And there's no reaction in terms of there's no flame, and it's extinguished, and it's very safe. And that cell can be removed. The battery can still operate. That cell will be removed, and a replacement cell will be put in. Obviously, you don't put nails into sides of batteries. That's not the message I'm portraying here. Cell level cooling. Again, this is our cooling system. I'll just show you the run through. Again, this is just a different angle of it, of where these are all the different cells. There's 24 cells in that particular system, and this is constantly the liquid cooled system that we have. That, as I say, is unique to our chemistry, frankly. So just last slide. I'm trying to follow you here to get down to the last second, but I let's see. OSV economics for the customer, that's very important with everybody. We've already said that all electric, maybe it's a big statement, some of our competitors may disagree, but an all electric OSV, I think we're some way away from that. I think we see OSV market as being a hybrid market, so yes. The house load on there would be a yes. We've got projects in play at the moment, and this is a project. This is that we've launched. There's 2 of these vessels actually that have been commissioned recently, and these are the typical savings that you're seeing in terms of the engine running hours are obviously decreased, so you've got a saving in terms of fuel costs, fuel consumption, emissions have gone down. So there's a clear trend here, and this is proven. This is not shifts figures. These are figures from our client. So those numbers are real savings that you get. So even if you're doing a retrofit, the ROI on a retrofit can be quite exciting for customers to consider and what they're going to get back in terms of payback. So that is, I see as a real benefit. But I think in closing, I would say knowing the operational profile of the vessel is important. Hybrid solutions, I think, are the way forward. Retrofits, we're seeing more and more of those in the market now. New builds obviously will come in, but people are seriously now retrofitting the vessels. And the last message I would say again is to say that there is still a discussion about different types of fuels, but that should not stop clients and ship owners considering now that they can still put batteries on their vessels today, and they can be adapted. Whatever you do with your vessel in the future in terms of fuel, the batteries today are still going to be the right choice in 5 years' time, and we can adapt, and the battery market can adapt to that type of requirement. So I think that will close it. So that's my last comment. Thank you very much indeed.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate the time and I think the takeaway for me on this is that the last 2 days we've discussed a whole gamut of options on future fuels.
Thank you.
But at least in all of the future fuels, there seems to be something that's pretty concrete, and there's no uncertainty about that. Batteries are here, and batteries are going to be here to stay. And to put that into further reality, I'm delighted to invite Mr. Abdul Bari to give a presentation on an actual positive concrete step. It's a project update on something that's already happening, which is the cold ironing project.
Hi, good afternoon. Okay. So since we're talking about the hybrid solutions, then the cold ironing is the good subject to be intact with. Okay. Let me get a quick introduction. Okay, so since we're talking about the decarbonization, we've got to understand what is the main challenge behind it. So statistically, the projection of the global warming overall projection is to have a 2.2 Celsius increase by end of the century, which will result in increase of seawater level by 20th centimeter by 2050. So that had taken the decarbonization journey to be kicked off across the globe, and many actions from different entities, including the IMO, to set regulations to limit the global warming. So the journey of decarbonization, we sense it's a collaboration in between owners, governments being responsible of the infrastructures, as well as the maker having the R&Ds in a place, and the regulators. The challenges we face within our business and industry is that the yard prices is going up, so we're limited with a solution. So here we're looking for the quick wins. So the alternatives looking not only to the yard, but only as well to the inexpensive energy saving devices we have. So what is quick wins along with the hybrids? The shore power connection is one of the solutions, and it's a quick to remedy the decarbonization and to fulfill the targets. The set target within IMO by 2050 is to reduce the greenhouses by 50%. Understanding your operation profile would tell you what is the most energy saving devices or a solution to be used, designed for your vessels. So looking at the statistics, the vessel stay alongside is in between 5% up to 15%. So tailored to this, you can decide moving ahead with the shore power connection being the most suitable in terms of a retrofit or the ROI, and the suitability with your onboard power management system, as well as understanding your pattern of trade. So if the facility is available within those ports or not, then modification will be very useful for your vessel. So if we can understand that the projection is to reduce the greenhouse emission by 50%, then you have a 15% quick win by retrofitting the shore power connection. So looking at the screen here behind, the cold ironing is not quite new technology. It's been there available for the smaller size boat, and today we're looking at the offshore support vessels as the second as well as the largest vessel. The major challenge we had is the availability of the terminals with the infrastructure. So going back to the main challenge, it's a collaboration, not only with the owner preparing his vessel for that journey, it's as well having the capability and infrastructure not only limited to the shore power, but extended to the other subject of having the alternative fuel available. So there is 3.5% across the globe. Terminals, ports are having the infrastructure for the shore power connection. So make sure when you trade, choosing the shore power connection, you will be trading within those ports. Here is the simple principle in between the foundation and the converters from the grid to the substations and to the vessels. So the technology now, looking at the switching from the onboard diesel generators to the shore power, It comes in a second. It's no longer complicated as it happened before, and there is an interface, so there will be no requirement for interference of more than one guy. So having the shore power connection, if your vessel stay is within 15% range, you can look at your planned maintenance as one of the advantages. So your operating cost will be reduced by 15% since your generator is stopped. Then your fuel consumption and the emission will be reduced by 100%. As well, looking at the neighbors within those terminals and ports, you will be dumping 100% vibration and noise. The most challenging part, as I mentioned earlier, is the availability of the infrastructure and basically the modification timing. So make sure that you align those modifications within those slots of your dry dock. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Abdul Bari. Unfortunately, Mr. Abdul Bari has an appointment that he could not get out of, but he did manage to spend time with us today. If I could just ask you one question before you have to leave, if you don't mind. What concrete steps has ADNOC taken to reduce the carbon footprint amongst your fleet?
Okay, thank you, Faisal. As we stated, the decarbonization, we look at it as a major landscape, and it's based on each owner's understanding, okay, which is being highlighted frequently to understand what is the operation profile each vessel he had. So whatever is applicable for certain segment of vessel or category, not necessarily is going to be applied. So every owner is looking for the maximum ROI. Okay, he can invest less, and that will be rewarded within a short period of time. I've mentioned during the speech that owners are limited with the options. So we have an aged fleet, and every owner is looking, due to the new regulation coming into force, looking either to replace his fleet, and then yard cost is going to be one of the challenges. So I think that every owner has to step back and think twice about what is the operation profile each vessel he has, rather than investing very much not in the right direction. So there is a quick ones had been mentioned in different events. You can use the weather routing, okay, and make sure that weather routing is being applied. So you need to have a softwares on board. So digitalization is important, so you can track the vessels and understand every possible best practice is being implemented. Hull cleaning, propeller polishing has been activated. Moving forward, we need to understand the hull lining of each vessel. So I can understand that the challenge, okay, isn't aligned across every fleet, from the OSV to a larger size vessels. There is a different challenges. We do understand that it plays a good role on the hull resistance. So starting from the bulbous valves to the coating used on the vessels, as well as the propulsion. And as mentioned, the power management system, including the gensets arrangements, battery solutions, shore power connections. Those are the chunk area where the consumptions is. Looking at the solutions and the one we found that it is very useful earlier, along from the one mentioned, the energy-saving devices. The emphasis on the energy-saving devices can extend at least the life of a certain type of vessels to the maximum life cycle till basically the prices of the yards cool down a bit, where the investment and business cases can be viable again.
So just one question before you go, sir. In the OSV context, in the supply base in Musafa, I believe you've done considerable work in terms of installing the cold ironing system process for shore power for vessels. Can you just tell us a little bit of what has been done so far?
Actually, we look to the decarbonization overall as a project. We have touched base on different segments, okay, starting from the shore power connection, okay, as one of the solutions. As well, beyond this, we have looked on the hybrid in terms of battery. So looking at those infrastructures as a project is one of our goals to deliver.
Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate you making the effort to come. If you join me in thanking Mr. Abdul Bari, I think he has to leave.
Thank you. Nice to see you again. Take care.
Thank you, sir.
Salam. Thank you very much. Thanks. But we do have two captives, so I'm welcome to take some questions from the floor.
I had a meeting to go.
Not yet. Could we have a microphone over here, please?
Guess we don't need the microphone.
Up front, here.
Hi, thank you. My name is Artur.
Hi.
I have two questions to both panel members. One is, in the next 10 years, which cell chemistry and format is likely to dominate from safety and economics perspective? And the other one is, in the world where OSVs is a very sort of short-term charter market, and given, I don't know, 3 to 5 years return on investment on hybrid technology, how do you incentivize the vessel owners to spend $2 million to install the systems? Thank you.
Who wants to take that first?
Do you want to go first on that one or no? Okay.
I can go first on the last question if you take
Okay,
the
yeah,
chemistry.
I'll take the first one. Okay.
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 I think on the last question here about incentivize, there are charters today which have they are agreeing when they are entering a 3, 5, or 7-year contract. Then they are agreeing what is the baseline together with the ship owner. What is a typical consumption you will have for your performance for your vessel? And if you have the data to support that, then you build more trust. If you don't have the data, then you're starting blank. But those that can build the data and start to be transparent, they can agree a baseline, and then you can always monitor, is the deviation from the baseline, is that caused by weather disruptions, heavier weather, or is it caused by smarter operations? And if you're able to show that you can reduce the energy consumption below a certain level, then there are charters today that are willing to share that gain. And those contracts exist, and there are charters doing that. So I think that is a matter of negotiation, it's a matter of discussion, it's a matter of opportunity. It's very difficult to have these kind of KPIs if you don't agree on what is the baseline and you don't have the way to measure it. So again, if you don't have the data, you are kind of losing out on those opportunities. So that's, I think my advice, when you are on top of data, then you can start also that process. But on the chemistry, I think I leave it to you.
Thank you. I mean, I think things will develop with the chemistry. I think the technology we use at the moment, which is lithium-ion, and we use NMC chemistry. That is still the road that we're following at the moment, because I know there's been a lot of discussions about lithium and how it's extracted, but we do it properly, and we have certifications that show that is done correctly. So from our point of view, that's the chemistry that we're continuing with at the moment, and we don't see any real development and changes on that. I can't, honestly, I'm not qualified to really say where it's going to be in the next 5 years, frankly, on that. But we're following the path we are following. We just need to be convinced that we have the safest batteries on the market in terms of how we keep things within a certain temperature range, because you don't put heat into a battery, obviously. You want to control that. So the technology that we use at the moment, we're totally comfortable with the cost of it compared to the safety, and the safety is paramount in terms of what we're putting on the market. So that's how I see it. You may have somebody else here who's probably more qualified to answer that question, frankly, but we don't have any drastic plans to change our chemistry, please.
No, I can also just add that in addition to this, there is research on solid-state batteries, of course, driven a lot by the automotive industries. Maybe within a decade we will see those kind of solutions. And the next is these with air systems. But that is also maybe another decade out there. So there is an extensive amount of research, in particular by the automotive industry. And that's where they are pushing the boundaries, both with regard to scale, price, down, and we are taking the cells.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm glad you've raised that, because I wasn't thinking down the automotive route specifically, because at the moment, what you need for an automotive battery is very different to a marine battery. You drive a car totally different to how you manage an OSV. So the technology there's no comparison between those two. You couldn't put a Tesla battery on board an OSV and vice versa. So, but yes, of course, we will each follow our own paths, but we'll learn from each other, and automotive will come up with something the same as aviation is coming up with different technologies. So I think as long as there's a collaboration and understanding that we learn from that. But I don't, not my belief, and it's proven that an automotive battery is not the technology that you put on board a ship anyway. So it's a totally different animal in terms of the performance.
True, my suggestion is, there's a gentleman sitting over there called Vivek Balagopal. If you put your hand up, catch him for anything else you want to know on batteries. It's a good source.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Vivek, got a question or? Okay.
Phew.
We're going to move on to the next panel, but before we do, there's a question I want to ask Arnstein, who mentioned something quite amazing about the accumulation of how many batteries in the marine world compared to Tesla. Would you care to share that with the audience?
Yeah, I can do that. I mean, a few years back in time, we got a question: how big is the marine use of batteries versus the automotive part? And at that time, this is a few years back, the total accumulated amount of batteries installed for marine purpose in ships is accumulating to 1 week of battery capacity for Tesla Model 3. 1 week production Tesla Model 3. So I think for us that is also indicating that we are a small player in this. The technology is there. It's being a lot of retrofit. What I'm happy to see now, extremely happy to see, is that all those projects that are driven in particular by the wind industry, which is triggering new builds, all of them, they are using hybrid technology. So there is no doubt. You don't build new today and build a copy of the past. If you want to build a new vessel today, please, battery is part of it, hybrid is part of it, and multi-fuel is part of it. For the remaining OSV fleet, it's like my colleague here is saying, then it's more about retrofit and how does it play with your operational profile. But 1 week Model 3 Tesla accumulated, and that says something. We are a small kid in this business.
Quite amazing, but thank you very much. If you please join me in giving a great round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. To the next intimate discussion is going to be called a fireside chat. If I could ask my good friend Tien Tai from HFW to join me. Thanks. Thank you, Alex. Tien is a partner at HFW, and he's a finance lawyer specializing in structured trade, commodity finance, and ship finance, and has been based in the UAE for 15 years. Tien has been involved in a number of domestic and cross-border trade finances and has been the head or the lead lawyer in some of the largest regional transportation financing. His experience also includes a US $1.2 billion restructuring of a major UAE-based oil trader / ship owner in 2012, one of the largest restructurings at the time in the regional oil trading sector. Tien, welcome. Why don't you sit over here, and I'm going to turn my chair around so I can be a little bit... So most of the discussion today has been on the challenges of the OSV market, and I I don't know if you were here for part of the morning, but we had a very robust discussion on the demand and supply gap. And one of the challenges that for a change, there's been enough demand on the OSV market, and the new challenge is there's not enough supply of vessels. Otherwise, the word was oversupply. To counter that, obviously many different avenues were explored, and it all came down to why isn't there new buildings? And that came down to the bottom line, well, where's the money going to come from? So that's my overarching discussion point to today. If we're going to solve this demand and supply gap, where is the money going to come from?
Fazal, thank you very much, and thank you also to Seatrade Maritime for the invitation. Can I just ask whether there are any bankers in the audience?
I think they all ran away.
I'm sorry?
I think they all ran away from the sector.
Okay, that's good. Then I could be a bit more open. Look, at the end of the day, the whole energy transition and the whole decarbonization journey is a difficult one for the financiers. In one sense, they're in the business to make money, to structure the deals. But they also have to balance that with their own investment risk. And the regulatory regime that banks operate in naturally makes them proceed with caution and conservatism. I think at the forefront of their minds with this whole energy transition is, am I going to finance a stranded asset? In other words, is the asset that I am financing, which is going to have a 20, 25-year lifespan, is that asset going to be relevant still in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time? And I think that's a legitimate question. So that's the banker's first question. And of course, as an owner-operator, you could go and say, look, I want my new build PSV to have a dual use. Once the whole energy transition flips a page, this vessel will go and service wind turbines. There's talks like that at the moment. There's dual use available for certain types of OSVs. But having said that, certainly in this region, and I must emphasize, it's in this region, OSV financing is certainly available, okay? We are involved in a number of OSV financings, from barges to AHTSs to PSVs, and we've been working with one owner in particular over the last year or 18 months, and they have just won a charter with an NOC. They've got 3 vessels in with that NOC. They're cross-chartering a few more, and as soon as they're delivered, they will go in with the NOC. Revenue on an annual basis, approximately 50, 55 million, so not a large player, but they have been in discussions with local banks, non-bank financiers from overseas who are looking at this region, and the discussions are going very, very well, okay? We've just finished another transaction, and the press release for this local bank from the head of their banking team says that we are delighted to support this transaction. Oil and gas is a strategic sector for us. So this is in their press release. So it's black and white. It can't get clearer than that. We are also in an environment now, and it's in a very happy environment, that the fundamentals and the sentiment for oil and gas is looking positive. And I think that's been the general theme over the last couple of months. And that's great because we haven't enjoyed this time since 2015. Okay, as an OSV owner-operator, we haven't had this upswing for many years. But the question is, what if we were not in this uptick? Could an OSV owner still get financing in 2014 or 2015, just before the eve of the oil price collapse? I've had that type of question, and I'll give you an answer to that, because we were involved in this very transaction, and I can mention the company because it's public knowledge now. In 2014, Topaz Energy and Marine, they said, I've
heard of it.
You may have heard of them, exactly. They said, look, we want to refinance our existing facilities. We've got 9 relationship banks. Our treasury function is non-stop. They're constantly paying different banks, asking for requests with other banks. We want to streamline everything. We want to get a club of banks together, and we want them to be our relationship banks going forwards. We know what we want, we know how much we're asking for, we know what we want to pay. So in, I think, December 2014, I still remember this vividly, Topaz invited all their relationship banks to the ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in the DIFC and said, and the management all got on the stage and said, this is who we are, this is our management team, this is what we're looking for, who's in. And if you're in, sign your NDA and you can go into our data room and download the term sheet, which very unusually the borrower, Topaz, produced. It was a 70-page term sheet. And basically, it was, this is what we want.
What you produced.
Which I produced, okay, yes. And so, and there were a number of questions from the banks. And one banker stood up and said to the CEO at that time, Renee, Renee, the oil price has just collapsed. How can you be asking all of us for $550 million US dollars? To which, in fairness, he gave a very good response. It was the usual response on, look, we've got a great contract backlog, we've got the options to extend, great corporate governance, and so forth. So what happened? 2015, it was pretty savage, but also in the middle of part of 2015, we closed the transaction. Topaz got its 550 million. Yeah, secured over 42 vessels across 7 jurisdictions, all the assignments perfected. So that was then, and that was on the eve of very poor fundamentals, very poor sentiment. And in those days, a good mid-sized OSV operator with good corporate governance got its financing. And why is it relevant now? Had Topaz not been acquired by DP World, that facility in 2015 would be up for refinancing now.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think that's very, very interesting, and I think this goes back to the issue when you're banking. When you are banking, a man is judged by the company he keeps, and very often a bank will be judged by the customer he keeps. So it's not just the asset, it's not just the market, it's also the caliber of the customer and the strength of the management team and the board and the entire entity. And that plays a huge role in having relationships with banking and then the whole trust factor. Based on that, you mentioned something, and this has been mentioned often. Who is going to invest today in a 25-year-old asset or life of an asset from a banking perspective? But surely bank mortgages today are not going to go for the full 25 years of the life of asset. Be 7 years, 8 years financing. So shouldn't a bank be less worried about what happens after its mortgage is released or paid off? How does a bank look at it today?
Good point. At the end of the day, yes, typical financing tenors or the terms, typically around 7 years, 5 to 7 years. But at the end of at the end of the day, those vessels typically need to be refinanced. So yes, the initial bank that comes in, that may not be an immediate problem for them, but still, it may not be that team's decision. It may be the mandate a little bit higher up that this sector, however you want to call it, may not be one we invest our finite capital sources into. We might want to go to technology, education, healthcare, for example, which are typically the buzz industries.
But I'm sure that 7 years worth of uncertainty is a lot safer than 25 years worth of uncertainty.
That's a fair point.
Okay. We talked about one of the consequences of not having new vessels in the market is that these massive projects that have been announced by Aramco, by Qatar Energy, by ADNOC, they will be increasing the age of acceptable vessels. It is one safety question and efficiency question mark as to is that a good idea or not. If the new builds are available with finance, terrific. But it seems to me that very, very few banks or very few owners are finding happiness or satisfaction with the financial community in being able to finance new builds today. The vessels, and I think what you've mentioned, they are sale and purchase agreements, but they're not necessarily new builds. They're financing existing assets.
Correct, yeah.
And therefore the risk factor is a little less in terms of the time it takes to build a vessel, for the time it comes to market, and then what will the market look like. Do you think the financial sector will actually bear the burden or the risk of delaying all of these oil and gas projects, which means demand will continue to outstrip supply of oil, which means where will the oil price go? Anywhere, but it can only go up. So will the community actually blame the financial sector for the price of oil?
Look, I can see where you're going with this, but I think financial institutions, banks, they're enablers, and so they will only support when it makes financial sense for them to do so. I think on the question of new builds, that is also a question for owner-operators at the moment as well. I mean, in the past couple of years, there's been very few investment in new builds. So you probably know better than me, what is the average age of an OSV at the moment? Probably
14 years.
14 years, low teens? Okay. So I think there is a need, as you say, with the contracts being tighter in terms of age, for a new building program to probably proceed. But if you start a new building program, I don't know, will the new build economics work out? How much is a PSV nowadays? A good large PSV? 50, 60?
Little less probably, but
Okay.
we don't know of that many because nobody's building.
Right, okay.
It's a
Okay,
very
let's just say
difficult
50 or
benchmark.
60 million, right? And then you get decent day rates of 40 to 50,000 a day, assuming you can amort it throughout the life of the PSV. Once it's delivered, you might be looking at 16, 17 years. So, do the new build economics work out? Can you get a slot in a yard? We had a bird earlier. Now
Yeah,
we've
I
got
know.
can you get a slot at the yard? That's another question mark. So there are a number of questions before you even start your discussion with the yards. We're working on some new builds, but they're not in the OSV sector. And we've identified a number of issues with, it's an LPG vessel, and it's supposed to be delivered in March of this year, but it's been pushed back by the Korean yard, and we're now looking at June, July delivery. It's an LPG vessel, and basically the tanks, the LPG tanks, are not ready, okay? And so the yard is saying, look, our subcontractor's not delivering the tanks, we can only do so much. Once the tanks are installed, we can finish the project. And by the way, this is all a force majeure, and so our delay, they're all permissible delays under the shipbuilding contract, so we do not have to compensate you for this. So the question is, again, if you're building a new OSV, are the supply chain issues now sufficiently ironed out? In our experience, you have to factor in some slippage, because clearly on